What if a single black stone, fallen from the heavens, could grant unimaginable power, or destroy everyone who dares to wield it? Follow the Templars on a journey from the deserts of Jerusalem to the icy fjords of the north, where ancient guardians, deadly visions, and the fate of empires await. Will they master the black stone, or will it master them? Long before kings ruled the Holy Land, before swords were raised in the name of God, the desert knew a night of fire. It began with a roar from the heavens, a sound that tore through the silence of the stars. Shepherds looked up and saw a blazing wound open across the sky, a single black star falling, dragging a tail of silver flame behind it. The earth trembled as it struck, somewhere beyond the dunes, and for 3 nights the horizon glowed red as if the desert itself was on fire. The nomads who dared approach spoke of a crater that steamed even under the cold moonlight. At its heart lay a stone unlike anything they had ever seen, smooth as glass, darker than midnight, and warm to the touch as though it held a living heart inside. When the bravest man among them placed his hand upon it, he swore he felt a pulse, slow, deep, powerful, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Strange things began to happen near the stone. Water left overnight would stay cool and fresh, no matter the heat of the day. Fires kindled near it burned hotter, as if hungry. And those who carried even the smallest fragment reported dreams of strange visions, battles they had never fought, cities they had never seen, and voices speaking in tongues no living man could know. The elders feared it, calling it a curse sent by the stars, but the young whispered another name for it, the gift of heaven. So they buried it under sand and stone, hiding it from greedy kings and wandering armies. For centuries, the world forgot it was there. But the stone waited. And when the first knights of the temple came to Jerusalem, drawn by faith and destiny, the earth would tremble once again, for the time had come for the black stone to be found. Jerusalem was silent under the moon when the first Templars descended into the ruins. The city had been taken, the Crusaders victorious, but the Knights of the Temple were not there for gold or glory, they sought something far older. Guided by scraps of ancient scrolls and whispered legends from desert mystics, they believed that beneath the Temple Mount lay secrets hidden since the time of Solomon himself. For days they dug in secret, their torches casting long, trembling shadows against the carved stone walls. Dust and darkness choked the air. At night, some of the knights reported hearing strange echoes, as if voices were whispering just beyond the range of understanding, urging them deeper. Eutychians, their leader, ignored the fears of his men and pressed on. On the 7th night, they broke through into a hidden chamber. The air that poured out was cold, untouched by the world for 1,000 years. Inside they found not treasure, but strange markings carved into the stone floor, a map of stars and symbols no one could read. At the center lay a pedestal, broken and empty, as though something had been taken long ago, or had fled. Then, in a corner half buried in sand, one knight's torch caught a glint of something impossibly black. They dug with their bare hands until they uncovered a shard no larger than a man's fist, smooth and heavy beyond reason. The moment Hugh touched it, the chamber seemed to shiver. The torches flared brighter, and every knight swore they felt a pressure in their chest, a slow, steady rhythm like a second heartbeat. "This," Hugh said, holding the stone aloft, "is what we were meant to find." None of them knew it yet, but this fragment was only a piece of something far greater. And with that discovery, the fate of the Templars, and perhaps the world, had begun to change. The shard was unlike any relic they had ever carried. From the moment they brought it out of the hidden chamber, a strange vigor filled the men. The exhaustion of digging for days seemed to vanish, their wounds from past battles ached less, and their resolve burned with new intensity. Eutychians ordered the shard to be kept under constant guard, wrapped in cloth, hidden in a chest of iron. Yet at night, even through the walls, the knights swore they could feel its presence, a faint pulse, as if the stone was alive. When they rode into battle, victory followed. The knights struck with uncanny precision, their courage unshaken even when outnumbered. Enemies said their swords glowed faintly in the moonlight, and that arrows seemed to turn away from them at the last moment. Word spread quickly through the Crusader states that the Templars were not merely warriors, but God's chosen instruments. But among themselves, they began to whisper, was this truly divine favor, or something older, something that had chosen them? One night, Brother Jeffrey confessed to Hugh that he had dreamed of a great black star falling into a sea of sand, and a voice calling his name in a language he did not know. Others admitted to similar visions, some beautiful, others terrifying. Eutychians was not a man of fear, but even he felt the weight of the shard growing heavier with each passing day, as though it fed on their victories, drinking in blood and glory alike. He began to wonder if the broken pedestal they found beneath the temple had once held something far larger, and if they had only taken the smallest piece of a much greater power. The decision was made, they would seek the rest of the black stone. No matter how far they had to go, no matter what dangers waited, the Templars would follow its call, to gather what had been scattered and unlock the secret that lay hidden since the night the sky burned. The decision was swift. The shard was not the end, only the beginning. Within weeks, Eutychians gathered a small band of his most trusted brothers and left Jerusalem under the cover of night. Their mission was known only to them, concealed even from other Crusader lords. They rode south, guided by maps copied from the strange carvings in the hidden chamber, and by a feeling none of them could explain, as though the shard itself pulled them onward like a compass pointing toward destiny. The desert was merciless. Sandstorms swallowed their tracks, and the sun burned like a cruel god. At night, the wind sang through the dunes like 1,000 voices, whispering words that made the horses shiver. Food ran low, and water scarcer still. Yet every time despair threatened to break them, the shard would begin to pulse, faintly glowing in the moonlight, filling them with strength enough to continue. After many days they reached the Nile, its dark waters gleaming like a silver serpent under the stars. Here they sought out desert mystics, Coptic scribes, and wandering Bedouins, offering silver and protection in exchange for knowledge. Again and again, one legend returned to them, of a black heart of the sky buried beneath the tomb of an ancient king who was never truly dead. Hugh's band pressed on into Egypt, past temples where forgotten gods still glared from the walls, past villages where children hid at their parsing. Finally, they stood before the Gezer Plateau, the pyramids rising like eternal sentinels against the blazing horizon. But as they approached, a storm unlike any they had ever seen swept across the desert, a wall of sand and darkness that blotted out the sun. In the heart of that storm, the shard pulsed like fire, so bright it seared their eyes. The knights fell to their knees, knowing this was no ordinary desert wind. Something was awake, and it had felt their coming. When the storm finally passed, silence fell over the desert, a silence so complete it felt like the world itself was holding its breath. The Templars stood, their armor caked with sand, and saw what had been revealed. Half buried in the dunes lay the entrance to a forgotten pyramid, smaller than the great tombs of Gezer, its stones blackened as if scorched by fire from the sky. No scribe had written of this place, no pilgrim had spoken of it. It was as though the desert had kept it hidden for this moment alone. By torchlight, they descended the narrow steps carved into the earth, the air growing colder with each step. Strange hieroglyphs covered the walls, not prayers to Ra or Osiris, but stars and swirling lines that looked eerily similar to the markings they had found beneath the temple in Jerusalem. It was as though some ancient hand had written the same story in two distant lands. At the end of the passage, they reached a great stone door, sealed for millennia. Hugh laid the shard against it, and to the astonishment of every man present, the door trembled and slowly ground open, as though the stone itself recognized its missing piece. Beyond was a chamber bathed in an unnatural light, the source hidden. And there, between two massive statues of jackal-headed guardians, stood a sarcophagus of black basalt. The air was thick and heavy, humming faintly like distant thunder. But before they could approach, shadows moved. From the edges of the chamber, figures emerged, not living men, but things that looked as though they had been carved from the same black stone as the sarcophagus. Their eyes glowed faintly, and with a grinding of stone on stone, they raised curved blades that shimmered in the strange light. The Templars drew steel. Hugh felt the shard burn in his hand, filling him with unnatural strength. He knew then that this was not merely a tomb, it was a test. The first guardian moved with a speed no statue should possess, its stone feet striking the floor with a sound like cracking thunder. Hugh barely had time to raise his sword before the creature's blade came down, sparking against steel. The force of the blow numbed his arm. Around him, the chamber exploded into chaos, 5 guardians in total, advancing with silent, relentless precision. The Templars fought like lions. Their swords rang out, their shields splintered, and the air filled with the smell of iron and dust. Yet for every strike that should have shattered stone, the guardians barely faltered. One knight was hurled across the chamber like a rag doll, his body striking the wall with a sickening thud. Then the shard flared. A wave of heat shot through Hugh's arm and into his chest, as if molten fire flowed in his veins. His next strike cleaved through a guardian's arm as though it was soft clay. The others felt it too, an unnatural strength surging through their limbs, their fear burning away in a rush of furious purpose. But there was something else. As they fought, a strange sound filled their ears, chanting, low and resonant, as though the stone itself was singing. Their vision blurred at the edges, and some swore they saw flashes of another time, men in bronze armor kneeling before the sarcophagus, a great black star burning overhead, a voice whispering promises of victory. When the last guardian fell, the chamber was silent once more. Their breathing was ragged, their blades chipped and red, but none of them had fallen. And yet, they were not the same men who had entered. Their eyes burned with a strange light, and their hearts beat in perfect unison, as if the shard's pulse had become their own. Hugh stepped forward and laid his hands on the sarcophagus. "Whatever lies within," he said, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands, "is the key." And with the strength given by the stone, he pushed the lid aside. The lid slid aside with a deep, echoing groan, and a gust of air colder than death swept through the chamber, snuffing out several torches. For a heartbeat, there was only darkness, then a faint glow began to pulse from within the sarcophagus, casting the knights' faces in ghostly light. Inside, upon a bed of black sand, lay not a body but a stone, larger than the shard they carried, perfectly smooth, and so dark it seemed to swallow the light around it. It pulsed with the same slow rhythm they felt in their chests, each throb sending a vibration through the floor, through the very bones of those present. Beside it lay a set of tablets carved from obsidian, etched with symbols so ancient that even the Egyptian scribes could not have read them. But as Hugh reached out, the shard in his hand began to glow, and suddenly he understood the markings, not with his mind, but somewhere deeper. It was not a tomb. It was a warning. The tablets spoke of a stone from the void, as shattered in the sky by the wrath of the gods, scattered across the earth to keep its power from consuming mankind. When the pieces are made whole, the words seem to whisper, "The one who unites them shall hold dominion over heaven and earth, but at a price no mortal can bear." The knights stood in awed silence. Brother Jeffrey crossed himself, whispering that they had found not a relic, but a thing too dangerous for men to touch. Yet Hugh could not turn away. The moment his hand closed around the larger fragment, he felt as though 1,000 voices cried out in triumph, and a vision seared itself into his mind. A great storm raging over distant seas, and a final piece of the stone resting far to the north, where ice and fire meet. He staggered back, heart pounding. Egypt had given them answers, but also a greater quest. The black stone was not whole, and now they knew where destiny called them next. The journey back from Egypt was a crucible. The desert once again tested them, but now they were different men, stronger, faster, untouchable. Raiders struck their caravan one moonless night, but the Templars cut them down with terrifying efficiency. Witnesses swore that the knights fought like demons, their eyes reflecting the firelight with a cold, unearthly glow. When they returned to Jerusalem, they were no longer merely guardians of pilgrims. They were legends. With the larger fragment of the black stone secured deep within their stronghold, the Templars became a power that no king nor priest could ignore. Gold flowed into their coffers, donated by lords who believed God himself favored these warrior monks. Their banner, the Red Cross, struck fear into their enemies across the Holy Land. Yet their rise was not without consequence. Other orders, the Hospitallers, the Teutonic Knights, began to whisper that the Templars had found something beyond holy relics, something that gave them an unnatural edge. Even the Patriarch of Jerusalem questioned their secret excavations beneath the Temple Mount. At night, the brothers continued to dream. Some saw visions of glory, crusader armies sweeping across the world, all enemies crushed. Others saw darker things, the earth split open, rivers of fire pouring forth, a black sun rising in the sky. Eutychians kept these visions secret, but he felt the pull growing stronger every day. The shard and the new fragment now pulsed in unison, their rhythm quickening, like a heart preparing for battle. Hugh knew what it meant. The black stone was calling to them. And the next step on their path would lead them far from the Holy Land, across the sea, through lands no crusader army had ever marched. But power draws envy, and destiny draws opposition. In the shadows, new enemies stirred. Some were men. Others, perhaps, were not. When the Templars returned to Europe, they were no longer the humble band of knights who had once sworn vows of poverty. They arrived as heroes, and as something more. Castles opened their gates to them, kings sought their counsel, and merchants entrusted them with fortunes. Within a generation, the Temple became the most powerful military and financial order in Christendom. But with power came fear. Rumors spread in the courts of Paris and London that the Templars had found a relic in Jerusalem that gave them unnatural strength, that they performed secret rites in hidden chambers, that they sought to build a kingdom not for Christ, but for themselves. Priests warned that no man should hold so much power outside the church. Kings, ever hungry for coin, began to wonder what treasure lay in the temple vaults. Not all enemies were mortal. In a monastery in Burgundy, a monk claimed to have seen a figure of living shadow standing at the foot of his bed, whispering that their stone of the void must be destroyed before it was made whole. In Spain, a group of knights returned from battle raving mad, saying they had seen a black rider on the hills, neither man nor beast, who vanished like smoke when pursued. Eutychians, older now, felt the weight of every decision. The fragment of the black stone was kept deep beneath the Templar preceptory in Paris, guarded night and day. But the more they protected it, the more it seemed to sing, its pulse reaching out through the very walls, as though calling to those who would claim it. One night, Hugh had a final vision, a land of fire and ice, where the northern lights danced like ghosts across the sky, and a shape half buried in the snow, the last piece of the black stone. He awoke drenched in sweat, his heart racing in time with the stone's rhythm. The choice was clear. Before kings and priests could unite against them, before the shadows at their heels closed in, the Templars would ride north, beyond the edges of the known world, to claim the final piece of the power that had chosen them. The Templar ships cut through the dark waters of the Mediterranean, carrying men hardened by battle and a secret heavier than any cargo. The larger fragment of the black stone lay secured in a chest of iron and silver, wrapped in layers of cloth and prayer, yet its pulse seemed to travel through the timbers, a subtle vibration that made the sailors uneasy. Nights were restless, filled with dreams of fire and ice, of black stars falling over frozen lands, and whispers that promised power or death. Passing the Pillars of Hercules, storms began to lash at the fleet, winds howling like the cries of ancient spirits. Eudepions felt the shard in his hand warm with each crash of waves, as though it knew the seas were testing them. The Templars pressed on, their faith and courage a shield against fear, yet every sailor whispered of seeing shadows on the waves, creatures with eyes like coals, riding the currents alongside the ships, vanishing when approached. Weeks passed, and the warm sun of the south faded into cold mists. The northern horizon revealed jagged cliffs and glacier glinting under the pale sun. Here, in lands of fire and ice, old gods still whispered through the winds, and the people spoke of stones fallen from the sky, feared and worshipped in equal measure. You knew instinctively, the last fragment of the black stone awaited them here, guarded not just by men, but by forces older than Christendom itself. The fleet anchored at a fjord carved by glacier, silent and forbidding. Snow dusted the decks, and the air smelled of salt and ancient ice. The Templars disembarked, weapons ready, hearts steady. As they marched inland, the rhythm of the two fragments pulsed like a second heartbeat, urging them toward the mountains, toward the legends that had once been whispered in faraway lands. But the land had eyes. Wolves, shadows, and something darker watched them, unseen yet undeniable. Eudepions knew that the journey north was no longer merely a search, it was a trial of the soul, a confrontation with the very forces that had scattered the black stone across the world. And only one question remained: who would survive to unite it? The mountains rose like jagged teeth against the grey northern sky, glacier gleaming under the pale sun. The Templars pressed forward, their boots crunching over snow and ice, the two fragments of the black stone pulsing in unison, as if calling to some unseen force. Every step deeper into the fjords brought whispers on the wind, voices speaking a language no living man could understand, echoing off cliffs and glacial walls. Then they saw them, figures carved from ice and shadow, standing sentinel along the frozen passes. They were not men, nor beasts, but something older, something shaped by the cold and the fury of the northern gods. Their eyes glowed with the chill of midnight, and their weapons shimmered like black frost. As Hugh approached, the larger fragment pulsed violently, and he felt a tug in his very chest, the stone warning, guiding, testing. The Templars raised their swords. The Guardians moved with eerie grace, yet without malice at first, circling, observing, a silent challenge. Then the ground beneath the knights trembled, and visions assaulted their minds, ice engulfing armies, fire raining from the sky, the black stone hole and commanding powers beyond mortal comprehension. Some knights faltered, terrified that the stone's influence was reaching beyond their control. You stepped forward, shard in hand, and called upon every ounce of faith and will. The two fragments began to resonate, casting a light that pierced the icy gloom. One guardian stepped closer, testing him, and Hugh realized the truth. These beings were not enemies, but keepers. To claim the final piece, they would have to prove themselves, not merely through strength, but through courage, wisdom, and restraint. The Templars spent days navigating trials of ice and shadow, each challenge more harrowing than the last. Their swords were tested, their minds pushed to the brink, and their loyalty to one another strained by visions of power and fear. Yet each time a knight faltered, the black stone's pulse reminded them why they had come, to unite what had been scattered across continents and centuries, and to face the destiny written in the heavens. By the seventh night, Hugh knew they were close. One more trial awaited, and then, the last fragment of the black stone would reveal itself, or consume them all. After days of relentless trials, the Templars reached a cavern carved deep into the heart of a glacier. The air was frigid, yet a strange warmth radiated from within, pulsing in perfect rhythm with the two fragments they carried. Eudepions led the way, the larger shard glowing like a beacon in the dim light, guiding them through the twisting tunnels. At the cavern's heart lay it, the final fragment of the black stone, half buried in ice, blacker than the night sky and smooth as obsidian. The moment Hugh's eyes fell upon it, the two shards he carried pulsed violently, as if recognizing their lost kin. A low hum filled the chamber, vibrating through bone and steel, and the air shimmered with a strange, almost liquid light. Hugh knelt and laid the two fragments against the final piece. The black stone thrummed like a living heartbeat, and as the pieces touched, a blinding light exploded from the center. The ice around them cracked, and the guardians of shadow and frost raised their arms in solemn acknowledgement. The power surged through the Templars, lifting them slightly off the ground, filling their bodies with strength, visions, and knowledge that no mortal mind could fully comprehend. Yet the power came with a warning, a voice, deep and ancient, echoing through the chamber. He who unites me shall wield dominion, yet the soul that clings to mortal desire shall be lost. The knights trembled, realizing that the stone did not merely grant power, it demanded sacrifice. For the first time, the Templars truly understood the weight of what they had sought. The black stone was not a relic to be hoarded or a weapon to wield. It was a force older than kingdoms, older than faith, older than man himself, a force that had been scattered across deserts, seas, and ice for a reason. Hugh raised his hand, the three fragments now unified, and felt the pulse of the universe itself resonate within him. He knew the path forward would not be one of conquest, but of choice, to protect the power, to understand it, or to be consumed by it. And in that frozen northern cavern, history itself seemed to pause, waiting for the Templars' next move. The moment the fragments fused, the black stone's pulse became a living rhythm within the Templars' chests. At first, it felt like a gift, clarity in thought, strength beyond mortal limits, a vision of battles won and kingdoms subdued. But as hours passed in the cold northern cavern, unease began to creep in. The visions became more vivid, more insistent, not just triumphs, but temptations. Power whispered in their ears, showing what could be, and what could be taken. Brother Jeffrey was the first to falter. He stared at Hugh with unseeing eyes, murmuring that the world should kneel before them, that kings and popes alike would be their servants if only they struck first. Another knight, Roland, spoke of visions of fire sweeping across Europe, of enemies vanquished, of cities kneeling in terror. Hugh felt the pull himself, a shadow creeping at the edges of his soul. Yet the stone was not malevolent in itself. It reflected desire, magnified the hidden hunger within each man. Arguments flared, swords nearly drawn among brothers who had fought side by side for years. Hugh realized that unity would be impossible unless he could command not only their loyalty, but their restraint. The guardians of ice circled silently, their forms now less threatening, more like watchers of fate than attackers. They seemed to test not the Templars' strength, but their hearts. Hugh understood that the black stone was both a weapon and a mirror, showing not what one could do, but what one was willing to become. Days passed in this tense vigil. Some knights began to pray, some wept, and some embraced the darkness within, their eyes reflecting the black light of the stone. Hugh held the fragments, feeling the immense power coursing through him, yet sensing the dangerous allure it had over his brothers. He whispered a vow to guide them wisely, knowing that the journey home would be more perilous than any battlefield, for the greatest threat was no longer outside, but within. The black stone had chosen them, but it demanded more than courage. It demanded their very souls. Night fell over the Templar stronghold like a velvet shroud, yet the darkness did not conceal the approaching threat. Spies, mercenaries, and assassins had infiltrated the outskirts, sent by nobles and prelates fearful of the knight's growing influence. Eudepion sensed their presence before any alarm sounded, the black stone pulsing in resonance, warning him of every footstep and whispered plan. The Templars assembled swiftly, armor clinking, swords drawn, hearts steady. As the first attackers breached the outer walls, the knights moved with precision beyond human capability. Hugh lifted the shards, and a pulse of light radiated from them, momentarily blinding the enemies. Arrows bent from the knights' shields as if guided by unseen hands, and swords that struck against the Templars splintered upon contact. Yet every surge of power left a shadow within. Brother Jeffro's eyes gleamed with hunger, his movements sharper, almost reckless. Some knights felt a thrill in the violence, a dark exhilaration that made victory intoxicating. You realized that while the stone protected them, it also tested their humanity, tempting them with a power that could erode their very souls. The battle raged through the night. Stones and fire clashed against steel. Cries of men echoed like distant thunder. The black stone flared with every strike, every heartbeat, every act of courage and violence, as if feeding on the intensity of mortal will. And when dawn broke, the attackers were vanquished, strewn across the frozen ground outside the preceptory walls. The knights had survived, but not unscathed. You looked upon their faces, fierce, tired, yet strangely altered. The stone had saved them, but at a cost. Power came with weight, and even victory bore the seeds of corruption. As the sun rose over Paris, Hugh whispered a solemn vow. They must master the black stone before it mastered them, or all they had gained would crumble under the weight of their own desires. Weeks after the siege, the Templars gathered in the vault beneath their preceptory. The black stone rested at the center, pulsing like a living heart. Hugh placed his hands upon it, and immediately the world around him seemed to dissolve. Shadows lengthened, walls vanished, and he was swept into visions not of the present, but of what might come. He saw deserts ablaze under crimson skies, cities falling in ruin, and armies vanquished by forces unseen. He saw the shards scattered across continents, calling to those who would unite them, and the ultimate convergence upon a land of ice and fire, the northern realm where the last fragment waited. The stone spoke not in words but in impressions, warning of perils both mortal and supernatural. Other knights experienced visions too. Brother Roland saw ghosts of fallen enemies, their eyes accusing, their mouths moving in silent cries. Brother Jeffro beheld kingdoms kneeling to a black sun, and he felt desire rise within him, the thrill of dominion, the intoxicating pull of absolute power. You realized that the stone was revealing the path, but also testing their hearts, showing them both salvation and damnation. Messages arrived from distant lands. Travelers claimed to see black meteors streaking across the sky, monks whispered of ancient prophecies, and sailors spoke of strange lights dancing over northern seas. Every clue, every vision, every rumor pointed in one direction. The final fragment lay far to the north, beyond the known world, where ice met fire and the winds carried the voices of gods and spirits alike. You understood that the journey would be more than physical. It would test their courage, loyalty, and sanity. The stone offered power, but only at a cost, and that cost would soon become clear. The north was calling, and with it, the destiny of the Templars and the fate of the black stone itself. The Templars' preceptory buzzed with unusual energy. Plans were drawn, provisions gathered, and ships readied for the perilous voyage northward. Yet even amid the bustle, the black stone pulsed like a living sentinel, sending subtle tremors through the walls and floors, as if whispering warnings only Hugh could understand. At night, strange phenomena plagued the knights. Shadows stretched unnaturally, moving against the light. Faint whispers echoed through the corridors, reciting names of places long forgotten, and visions visited them as they slept. Black meteors streaking across distant skies, icy mountains splitting under strange lights, and figures carved from shadow, watching silently from the edges of reality. Each event heightened their unease, yet also strengthened their resolve. The fragments called to one another, and the Templars understood that delay could weaken the connection, possibly even destroy the path to the final fragment. Hugh convened his most trusted knights. The journey ahead is not merely over seas or mountains, he said, voice low but resolute. It is through the very essence of the world itself. The stone has chosen this path for us. We must follow it, though it may test our minds and our hearts beyond measure. Maps from ancient scrolls were cross-referenced with the visions they had experienced. Strange symbols, etched centuries ago in Egypt and Jerusalem, now aligned with northern fjords and volcanic lands far beyond the edge of the known world. Legends of meteorites and gods who walked the ice became intertwined with their mission. Every detail pointed to the same truth. The last fragment lay in a place where fire met ice, guarded by forces older than men. Even as ships were provisioned and oars readied, the knights sensed unseen eyes tracking them. Wolves with eyes like coals, figures glimpsed in mists, and lights flickering along distant cliffs seemed to follow their preparations. The stone's pulse quickened, warning them that the trials ahead would not be overcome by steel alone. Only unity, courage, and unwavering faith could guide them through the shadows awaiting in the northern reaches. And so, under a crescent moon that cast eerie silver light over Paris, the Templars prepared to leave everything behind: home, kingdom, and certainty, to pursue a destiny written in fire, ice, and black stone. The Templars sailed into waters few men dared to chart, where storms tore at masts and waves rose like mountains under a pale, frozen sun. The black stone's pulse seemed to merge with the rhythm of the sea itself, vibrating through the holes, through the oars, through the very hearts of the knights. Each surge of the tides carried whispers in an ancient tongue, chilling the men to the bone. At night, fog rolled over the decks like living silk, and shadows moved within it, figures neither human nor beast, watching silently, vanishing when approached. Some knights swore they saw shapes in the spray of the sea, black meteors arcing across the horizon, casting brief, fiery light on jagged cliffs and icy waters. The stone hummed in Hugh's hands, warning, guiding, yet also stirring desires and fears deep within the brothers. Tensions grew. Brother Jeffre's eyes reflected the stone's black light, and murmurs of dominion began again. Others whispered of ghosts from distant lands, fallen warriors, priests, and kings, warning or cursing them. Hugh had to keep the knights united, reminding them that the stone's power was both gift and burden. Any faltering of will could doom them all. Days stretched into weeks, and the northern horizon finally revealed a land of ice and fire, volcanoes puffing smoke into the pale sky, glaciers splitting into the sea, and fjords that seemed carved by the hands of giants. Here, the last fragment waited, and with it, the final trial. The stone thrummed as if alive, eager, impatient. The knights knew that this land would test not only their bodies, but their minds, their loyalty, and their very souls. As they rode toward the jagged cliffs, Hugh whispered a vow to himself and to the black stone: "We will face what awaits, together. No darkness, no temptation, no power shall break us, or the stone shall choose otherwise." The northern wind howled in reply, carrying with it the promise of both revelation and peril, as the Templars stepped into the realm of ice, fire, and ancient guardians. The cliffs of the northern fjord loomed over them like the walls of an ancient fortress. Smoke spiraled from volcanic peaks, mingling with snow-laden winds, and the Templars pressed forward cautiously, each step crunching over ice cracked and polished by centuries. The black stone thrummed violently in Hugh's hands, its pulse a living force that seemed to beckon the final fragment from somewhere deep within the mountains. Suddenly, shadows moved across the glacier, figures of ice and fire, towering as tall as men, yet with a fluidity that made them appear both solid and ethereal. Their eyes glowed with a deep, obsidian light, and their presence radiated an aura of judgment. Hugh realized immediately, these were the true guardians, older than any man, bound to protect the last fragment of the black stone from unworthy hands. The knights formed ranks, swords, and shields at the ready, yet the guardians made no initial attack. They moved as if testing, circling the Templars, their presence imposing a trial of courage, will, and restraint. As Hugh stepped forward with the shards, visions assaulted him, ice-consuming armies, fire-raising cities, and the black stone whole, radiating a power that could elevate or destroy. Every knight faced their inner desires, the whispers of dominion, the temptation to seize absolute authority. Then Hugh placed the two fragments against the final piece embedded in a volcanic stone pedestal. The combined shards pulsed together, sending a shockwave of light and heat through the cavern. The Guardians flinched, but did not strike, recognizing that the Templars had passed the first test of restraint. Hugh felt the stone's power surge through him and the others, their hearts beating in unison with its rhythm. For a moment, time itself seemed to pause. The stone revealed its full majesty, visions of continents connected by its influence, of men and gods alike bowing to its power, and of the precarious balance between creation and annihilation. Hugh understood that the Templars had succeeded in uniting the fragments, but the Guardians' gaze reminded them that power without wisdom was perilous. As the light subsided and the Guardians retreated to the shadows, the black stone lay whole before them. The Templars had achieved what centuries had sought, yet the weight of the stone, its history, and its destiny pressed upon them with undeniable force. The black stone lay whole before them, radiating a power that seemed to pulse in time with the very heartbeat of the earth. Hugh knelt, feeling its warmth and weight in his hands, aware that centuries of destiny had led to this moment. Around him, the knights gazed in awe and trepidation, knowing they held in their grasp a force that could shape kingdoms, rewrite history, or destroy all they held dear. The Guardians had withdrawn into the shadows, leaving the Templars with a silent warning: power must be tempered with wisdom, or it would consume even the purest of hearts. Hugh looked at his brothers, men who had fought beside him through deserts, pyramids, and northern storms, and saw the struggle in their eyes. The stone had tested them, revealed desires and fears, and magnified their very souls. After a long silence, Hugh spoke, his voice steady but solemn. The stone is not ours to wield as we please. Its power is ancient, its will beyond comprehension. To guard it is to accept its burden, not to claim dominion. The knights bowed their heads in agreement, understanding that the black stone was both a gift and a curse, a force that demanded responsibility beyond ambition. They buried it deep within a hidden vault carved into the frozen mountains, concealing it with wards, runes, and iron forged with the fire of the nearby volcano. Only Hugh and his most trusted brothers knew its location, and they swore an oath to protect it, to never let greed or fear lead them to misuse its power. As they descended to the fjord and prepared to return to Europe, the black stone pulsed faintly, almost in approval. Hugh felt its heart beat within his own chest, a reminder that history would remember them not as conquerors, but as guardians. The northern winds howled around them, carrying whispers of future seekers, of those who might one day rise to challenge the balance once more. The Templars had triumphed, yet they knew the journey of the stone was never truly over. Its power endured, waiting, watching, a shadow and a light across the ages. And in the silence of the fjords, under the pale glow of the northern lights, Hugh understood the final truth. Some forces are not meant to be mastered, only respected and protected until the end of time.